Hi guys, I am getting super creative today, and so I am doing this beautiful little persimmon pouch, but I did a reverse applique on the front. It's adorable. I'm going to be using mine for medical supplies in my handbag, so I've used a beautiful medical fabric. But this was pretty quick to make, so if you'd like to see how I make it, stay tuned. Alright, so in addition to cutting out all your main panels, you're also going to want an extra piece for your reverse applique. And I've printed out some shapes. So I printed out these before I decided what I was going to do. As you can see, I did the cross. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my craft knife on a self-healing mat and cut out the shape. So you could just take scissors if you're really good with scissors, but I find that this is probably going to be quicker for me. So we're just going to cut out the inside of the cross shape. I suppose you could also cut around the edge of it and just have it as a shape to trace around instead of inside. That's entirely up to you. But we're going to need to use the knife anyway, so this is probably good practice. Okay. So there we go. So we now have our cross cut out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my outside pieces and reverse it and then figure out where I want my cross. So I'm going to want mine in the center. So I'm just going to fold it in half and mark some points and then use a ruler to mark the center point. Like that. So I'm going to do that. And then I need to grab this, and even though we're not sticking it here, I want to see where it's going to sit to. So that's my accent, so I need to put it up there like that. So, you know what, and that's why I did it this way. So I'm just going to take this piece and put it like this, and then just trace around the shape. So these are going to be where we cut out. Like so. So then I'm going to take my craft knife again and just carefully cut along that line. So I'm always starting from the top and working down towards the center, because if I slip on the inside, that won't matter. You can cut further in and it's not a big deal, but if you cut further out, that's a problem. So I'm just cutting along all the bits I drew. This is probably obviously one of the more time-consuming parts, but it's going to look epic. If you have some fine scissors, you could probably cut this out so you make a hole in the center and then work out to your edges. But I actually think that for what I'm doing with lots of straight edges, this would be quicker for me. But if you don't have a craft knife, by all means, use some embroidery scissors if you've got them. Okay, so now I have a cool hole. So what we're going to do now is we want that to sit like so. So I don't need that much. That's obviously an overkill. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop off like a piece. Flip it over, and then this is where your double-sided tape is God. So we just want to have some tape that's going to hold it all down in place. You can put the tape wherever you want, depending on your shape will depend on where you put the tape. If you've got a skinnier tape, like a 6mm or a 3mm, you could obviously get closer, so it's going to hold it even better. But mine is a very simple shape. due to the fact that I have to pick up my child soon, but I really want to do this. And I really need, like, a medical kit in my car, so that's what this is probably going to turn into. Either my car or my handbag. Alright. Then we're just going to stick that over the space. Now, it looks like this. I love this holographic stuff. I don't think you can get that holographic stuff anymore. Where I got it from was Spotlight. That was a while ago now. I also forgot to put the right color thread in. So I'm just going to go around it with... I was going to do black, but I actually think silver might look cool too. I'm going to put a black bobbin in and then do a silver top thread. So I'm using bonded polyester and the size is M40. Which I think in American is Tex 70, I think. Don't hold me to that because I'm not 100%. Alright. So, now we're going to take this shape, and you can start wherever you want. I'm going to start in a corner so that I know what's going on. I'm going to start inner corner heading outwards. I've got a 3 3/4 stitch length. So I'm going to crank 3 and then go back into the first one. Go up to the edge. And so we're just going to do this very slowly, and you just want to stitch around the shape. So you're going to be nice and close so that it's not going to dangle or move around, but not so close that you go either in or too far out of the shape. Slow and steady wins the race. If you're doing it on a domestic machine, I would put my speed control down to very slow. It only takes 1 foot slip and you've sewn off into the sunset. And because this is vinyl on vinyl, once you've made the hole, you can't unmake the hole. I always have my needle down when I switch. So needle down, foot up with my knee lift, and then pivot. That way I won't lose my spot. And then I'm going to manually go back through the 2 previous holes. And voila! So I've got like a nice stitch around the edge. So now I'm going to take my vinyl accent and line it up along the bottom edge. Put my needle down, keep my decorative stitch length on, and I'm going to stitch all of that down. So I want to back stitch at the start of this. And then back stitch to there, grab my back piece, and I'm going to do the same thing. Line it up at the edge. So I'm doing 1/8 of an inch from the top edge. And I'm making sure that this bottom is constantly lined up. You could put a piece of double-sided tape if you wanted to. If I was doing a bigger size, I would probably use tape for this. But I have faith in my mad skills that I can do that bit. Alright, so now we're going to flip it over. I'm going to chop off all the excess. Actually, what we might do is from this side, I might just stitch right around the edge to hold it all in place. So I'm just stitching well, like right on that very, very edge, and that way it's not going to be able to move when I'm trying to sew it. And do the same to the other one. So I'm just stitching as close as I can. I've still got it just on the 3 3/4 mil stitch length. I'm not really so worried about the stitch length. I just want to kind of baste it down in place. Needle down, pivot, needle down, pivot, needle down, and pivot. There we go. Now I can chop off all that excess, and I'm not going to be worried about it moving around at all. It is quite firmly stuck. Chop off all my tails as well while I'm at it. Now, because this is all vinyl, I didn't put any interfacing on this, but if I was doing this on a fabric, I would put woven iron-on interfacing on the back. So now I'm just going to go over to my iron and iron my foam pieces onto the outside pieces. So I'm just going to hit pause while I do that. Alright, so that's now ironed on. So what I actually did was I put it face down like this on my ironing board, and then I got a piece of baking paper from the kitchen, put that over the back, and then ironed it from that way because I didn't want to put my iron on the vinyl and wreck it. So baking paper is good when it comes to anything ironing. Okay, so now we should have 2 outsides, 2 linings, 1 zip, and a zipper pull. I'm just going to pop that down there so it's out of the way. So first thing I'm going to do is grab one of my lining pieces and my clips and start at one edge and clip it all the way around. So I'm making sure the clips go all the way to the teeth. That means it's going to hold it in the right spot for me, so that we're not going to get any weird buckles or anything. If you're super clever, you can do all 3 layers at once, but I find it much easier to do 2 layers and then just put the other one on. Also, the teeth are currently here facing up towards me. Alright, so I've got a bit of a sun shape going on. So I've got lining up and then the zipper teeth facing up as well. Now I'm going to make sure that's all the way to the edge with a clip, and then I'm going to trim off the excess so that I know that for the other side it should fit exactly like that. So then I can pull off the other half of the zipper tape and put this side facing down like a sandwich, and then I'm just going to add it to the clips that are already there. So these pieces are all the same, so this should fit in beautifully. Just add it to the clips as I go. I find this much quicker than trying to do it the other way. Okay, so all my clips are in. I've now got a giant sandwich, so I'm gonna put my stitch length back to 2.5, and I'm going to put this side of my zipper, this side of my foot up against the zipper, and then stitch around, making sure that I back stitch at the start. I'm just gonna pull the clips off as I go, and stitch all the way around. Like that, and back stitch at the edge. At the end, sorry, not the edge. Although I suppose it is an edge too. Edge, end. So if all went well, your zip should be in there. Now before I turn that, I'm just going to clip this down. So I'm going to use zigzag scissors because I have some. These are Triumph brand from Spotlight. They're not the most expensive, they're not the cheapest, they're just kind of an averagey brand. And what I'm doing is I'm trimming off the excess foam. So I'm not cutting all of it, I'm just cutting the foam. So it's less bulky when I turn it out this way. So this is what we should have. Then I'm going to do the same to the other side. So I'm going to clip it with the teeth facing up on the lining. I'm going to clip this one a bit differently. So I know that this has to fit this shape. So I'm going to do a couple on that side and then come over to this side and clip that in. That's why we clipped it at the end before. I cut a 14 or just over 14.5 inch zip, and then I had that little bit to cut off. But if you have it as like smaller continual pieces, like 3 meters, you can just have it all here and chop off the excess, and that way you waste nothing. Unfortunately, my rolls are huge, so that doesn't work for me. And one more there. Excellent. So that's now clipped on. So I'm going to take this piece and put it down like a sandwich and then add it to the clips, making sure I line up those edges. Put a couple of clips each side and then come back to the other side, make sure it's all going to fit. Just adding it into all the clips like that. So now I can do the same thing again. So I'm going to start at the end, back stitch, stitch around, pulling the clips off as I go. So that's another thing. I always put the clips, the colored part, facing up so that I can just easily pull them off as I'm stitching around. And then I don't have to stop every time I come to a clip because they come off nice and easy. If you have them upside down, they don't always pull off nicely. So, where did I put my scissors? Here. So I'm just, again, going to cut off that excess foam because I don't want that much bulk in my seam because it is a smaller bag. Alright, chopped it off and then just turn it out the right way. So now we're going to top stitch this. Now the reason I've got black in the bobbin and silver on the top is because I'm going to have a nice silver accent and then the black on the bottom to match my lining colour. There is method in my madness, I promise. Okay, so we're back up to, I'm doing a 4 stitch length. I'm going to do 3 stitches and then go back into the first one. And then I'm just going to pull on this zip to make sure that everything's sitting flat and flush. And top stitch 1/8 of an inch from where the zipper joins. I'm just tugging sections at a time. I don't have to run at 100 miles an hour. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Sit that down. Couple of stitches forward, couple back. And then off we go. So pull on that zip, helps to get it nice and center so that your lining's not caught up at all. Just go around the curve nice and slowly. And then back stitch. Chop off the tails and separate them. So now, look how beautiful that stitching is. But because I did black, you can barely see it on the inside. If I had done silver, you would see it on the inside, which doesn't necessarily matter, but I didn't want to. Alright, so this is now my pouch. So now I need to decide which way I want my zip to go. So I want it to come and zip up this way. So I need to attach it to this end. So if you don't have a zipper jig or you haven't made one out of a fork, you just sit half of it on one side and then feed the other half in. You just want them to be perfectly even, and then if you push that zip, it should take off. Alright, this is going to be super fiddly. I'm going to use my zipper jig, but I'll move it where you can see it. See, it's a fork on a clamp, so I can clamp it to my table. Pop that in. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to zip it all the way up and take the end off. And then I'm going to put it back onto the end. So what this does is it closes this opposite end for us. So then just open it up about halfway and feed it back in. Like so. So then I'm just going to leave the top half open. And before I turn it, I'm just going to back stitch over the zip a few times to make sure that it's not going to come undone on me. Because that's the last thing I want after I've just spent all that time stitching it. So this just prevents the zip falling off the end. Okay. So now that that's like that, we can turn all these pieces back the wrong way, like so. I'm going to move that so I don't hurt myself. So now what I'm going to do is the outside pieces, where all the vinyl is, I'm going to stitch the bottom closed. But I am going to use clips to hold it because it's not going to want to sit perfectly straight. And we don't want it to veer off at the end, which is what it's doing the way it's sitting. So I'm just going to put a bunch of clips on there like that, and then stitch the bottom. So we need to go back to a 2.5 stitch length, because that's a nice strong size, without over perforating your vinyl. Back stitch. Chop off all your tails, and then we're going to go and do the lining. So what you want to do is you only want to stitch about 1 inch on each end and leave that middle open so that you can turn it out. Now this might get a bit fiddly because the bag might get in the way. Just push it up inside itself so it's not in your way. So you don't want to do too much that you're not going to have a big enough hole, but you need to do enough so that we can box off those corners. So that's one. So as you can see, I'll show you this side. I've just done that much there. So I'm going to do the same on the other end, and then it's going to leave this middle section here open. So same again. Make sure I backstitch at the start and the end. Cut off all my tails. Still got another one over this side, whoops. Okay. So now I'm going to box the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my fingers at the bends and pull, matching my teeth up with the seam line. I'm also going to open this seam flat so that there's not too much bulk. So we want to line all of that up nicely and then clip it down. That one's the wrong way. Right, so I've just done the outside. Then I'm going to grab the lining piece and add that into those clips. So again, it's gonna look exactly the same. We're gonna add it into the clips so that when I stitch across there, I will get both the lining and the outside. So I'm going to do that side first, and then I'll come back and I'll do the same thing to the other end. So we're going to stitch, back stitch a few, and then stitch along there all the way to the end, and then back stitch some more because we want to lock that in. Excellent. So now it's nice and squishy. So now we're going to do the same to the other end. However, we need to make sure, as you can see here, oh, you probably can't see it, my zip is all the way to the stitching that I did. So I just need to move this zip up so that I'm not going to accidentally stitch it. So you just put your hand through the hole and pull the zipper up. And then we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to squish open and then open our seam allowance here. So pull one each side and clip that down. So that seam allowance should be in line with our zipper on the other side. So I've got 3 clips in there. Then I'm going to grab my lining piece and do the same thing again. So we just want to get it to its corners and add it into those clips like that. We also want to make sure with our lining, if we didn't open our lining, we need to make sure it's heading in the same direction. And then we're going to stitch that shut. So we're going to do a couple of stitches forward, a couple back, and then stitch along that seam. Slow and steady wins the race because it is quite bulky, especially for such a little item. And then we just want to make sure we back stitch. We're nearly finished. So now we're just going to turn out our pieces through that lining hole that we left. So we do one side of the bag at a time so that we don't overstrain it. We're just going to push it through a little piece at a time, like so. Oh, it's so cute. Alright, so that's what the bag's going to look like, but we still need to stitch our lining shut. So I'm going to change both of my, I'm going to keep my bobbin black, but I'm going to change the top to black as well so that we don't notice the stitching that I do on the inside of the bag. So I just chop off my thread, tie it, and then pull it through. I never pull it through the needle though, because you will most likely snap, bend, or break your needle It's not worth the drama. Although that just frayed on me. There we go. So it's actually already sitting pretty shut, but we need to turn the bag back to the inside out position so that we can get to this seam. If you want to, you can hand stitch that shut. I don't like hand stitching, so I won't be doing that. It's already sitting with all the raw edges in, so all I need to do is stitch as close as I can to that edging. I might put some clips just in case it shifts on me, because we don't want that. So like I said, the bigger the gap, the easier it is to turn, but the closer to that edge, the harder this will be to stitch shut. So we're just going to do a couple of stitches forward and back to lock the stitches in, and then I'm stitching as close as I can to that open edge without falling off the edge. There we go. Trim off our tails. Push it back out. So you put your thumbs in those corners and really kind of wiggle them back out. Like that. Oh, see, I didn't pull that edge out. And there you go. One adorable little bag. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I'm sure I will do another one soon. Bye.